Yes. Well, hello, everyone. It is Friday, July 11th, and I am here with Jared Gould, the managing editor for Minding the Campus, the online publication of the National Association of Scholars. My name is Teresa Manning, and I am the policy director at the National Association of Scholars and also the president of the Virginia affiliate. Welcome, Jared. Thank you for joining me today for the third episode of our news roundup. We were all on vacation last week because of the 4th of July. I hope, Jared, you had a nice, relaxing weekend.
It was good, yeah. I went out on a lake and beat the thunderstorm before I got to shore right before it came in, so I was happy about that.
Yeah, very happy. Safety first. So anyway, on the agenda today, I picked three topics, and so did Jared. I would like to discuss what is happening with Title IX and the University of Pennsylvania, but also mention some defiance by California and Maine to what the University of Pennsylvania is doing with the Trump administration. Second, the Education Department announced an investigation into George Mason University in Fairfax County, Virginia, for violating Title VI of the Civil Rights Act because of its continued commitment to diversity ideology, what are called DEI programs, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's a euphemism for reverse discrimination, actually discrimination based on race, ethnicity, I think also religion and viewpoint, but we'll get into that. And last, developments with the False Claims Act, which the Justice Department announced it was going to be using with universities. That's an interesting development because universities already have to assure the federal government when they receive federal funds that they are abiding by federal law. So they have to say they are not discriminating based on race, as is required by Title VI, or based on sex, as is required by Title IX. So there's already a contractual obligation for schools to not break federal law and not lie to the federal government about it. But because schools are so unscrutinized, a lot of them just do business as usual, regardless of what federal law requires. And they assure the federal government they're complying with the law when they are not and continuing with their diversity programs. The False Claims Act is a a Civil War era statute that adds a layer of guarantee, basically asking schools to independently certify in addition to their current certification. And if they misrepresent, that is, if they lie, they can be sued for treble damages by the government. So a powerful enforcement tool, and also private individual citizens can instigate that litigation and file complaints. And the American Alliance for Equal Rights has announced an initiative on its website telling citizens who know about illegal discrimination at universities, have evidence of illegal discrimination, to use that page of their website to commence a complaint. So, Jared, I don't know if you have any issues with those three topics. You, for your part, wanted to discuss what is happening at the University of DC. Is that
Yeah,
right? DC?
University District of Columbia,
Oh,
UDC, and then we should dive into the big beautiful bill and the article that I wrote this week on China.
ah, great. And those were all essays at Minding the Campus. Is that the
Yeah,
agenda?
yeah,
Okay.
they'll all be featured over the weekend, actually.
Okay, great. So we'll start with my topics first, then we'll turn to yours, and hopefully we won't go much beyond the allotted hour. So starting with Title IX, which has been a lot in the news, Title IX is the congressional ban on sex discrimination in federally funded education. But it's associated with sports, with campus kangaroo courts, with due process, and now with gender ideology and trans athletes. we've all heard the stories of men pretending to be women and then being allowed to participate on women's teams. We've seen ugly spectacles with the Olympics in a boxing match where a woman was knocked out within a matter of seconds because of the
Right.
biological physical differences between men and women. And we've seen other snippets of female volleyball players suffering injury at the hands of opponents who were men and hit the ball harder. So this is a crazy development in my view. I can hardly believe that we are at this point. When I was growing up, the idea that a guy would want to participate on a women's team was unthinkable. It would be undignified and embarrassing to admit that he didn't have what it took to compete with other men. But we are in
Um,
different times. Probably the most celebrated case illustrating this issue is with Kentucky swimmer Riley Gaines, who tied in a championship, a diving swimming championship, with Leah, who was actually Will
yeah.
Thomas, a male swimmer who took hormones for a year, claiming he was a female, and then was allowed to participate in the girls' events on behalf of the University of Pennsylvania. The good news is that Trump, the Trump administration, out of the gate has targeted this ridiculous development as unacceptable and illegal under Title IX itself and under his policies heading the federal government. And he has been, or his administration, I should say, investigating a number of schools. I think 45 is the total now for just Title VI, that is race-based discrimination, but investigated the University of Pennsylvania, and the school and the administration have arrived at a resolution agreement, which is, as far as I can tell, a complete victory for the Trump administration, and I would say also for America. So the University of Pennsylvania has agreed to not allow men on women's teams, which is what Trump's two executive orders in January and February required. It's also the common understanding of Title IX. The school is also required to apologize to female athletes who've been hurt by the participation of men in their sports, and records, honors, and awards that had been given to these male athletes will be revoked at the school and no longer displayed. So this looks like win-win-win for America and the Trump administration. Sadly, this is not the universal experience from schools and from states. California and Maine continue to defy the Trump executive orders, and California now, I believe, has been sued by the Justice Department. The focus in those states has been more the K through 12 level as opposed to private universities such as the University of Pennsylvania. But by way of comment, I am surprised. I'm always surprised by these developments because this issue has so much support from the American public. I think figures are around 80% of the American public strongly disapproves of men participating in female sports. I actually think that figure is low. It is probably much higher. So it's an
Yeah.
odd thing to have states go against the grain when Trump really is representing a consensus viewpoint, which is unusual in our contentious times. Jared, any comments or questions about that topic?
Yeah, well, it is weird. It goes back to that chart that you've seen before with Congress. It's like, well, if 30% of the American public supports a bill, it is likely not going to pass. Um, if nobody supports the bill, it actually has a higher chance of passing. And so it's funny that the vast majority of Americans disapprove of men, biological men, participating in women's sports, but the universities just kind of turn their nose at that opinion, which is funny because it's the opinion of the taxpayers that fund them, and yet they're not listening to the people that they take money from. The question I have would be, Where do you see this going on in 4 years? I mean, do you see kind of another reversal, like a U-turn with Penn, where, a leftist gets into the White House and now they take back their apology, they reinstate the winnings to Will Thomas, not Leah Thomas. What do you think?
Well, that would be a court question. We've yet to have a court opinion that specifically addresses this issue under Title IX. But once the courts come out and say that this development violates Title IX, and we're very close to that because we do have a huge body of case law that looked at the bad Biden regulation that was blocked and thrown out by every court to review it. And that regulation tried to redefine the term sex to include gender ideology, which would have been a green light for all of these athletes and locker room problems and restroom problems. So the courts struck down that regulation as a violation of Title IX because it redefined sex. So we already have an indication that the courts are seeing Title IX as prohibiting this. But the specific instance of male athletes will probably need a case that's exactly on point. But that's the next thing. Maybe that will get in the pipeline during the Trump administration, but that's what we would hope to see to make this a more permanent interpretation of Title IX. It's interesting that you mentioned universities go against the taxpayers. I think it was Peter Berkowitz, who used to be on the board of the National Association of Scholars, who called universities the least scrutinized institutions in the country. That was true for a long time. I don't think we can say that under Trump, though. I think
Yeah.
going after Columbia, going after Harvard, investigating the University of Pennsylvania,
The
all of
UVA president.
the
Um,
UVA, which is the next thing we're going to discuss. Suddenly, universities that did whatever they wanted, including flouting the law with impunity, are now in the spotlight and being called to account for some of their malfeasance. So one has to rejoice at this development because when the cat's away, the mice will play. If there's no accountability, no supervision, obviously both individuals and institutions are going to end up misbehaving. This is just the nature, it's human nature, it's the nature of institutions, and boy, have universities and colleges done that, taking the money and running, overcharging for tuition, abusing the student loan program, totally politicizing course content, refusing to hire anyone who wasn't a left-wing radical. They've just abused their discretion. So I think this oversight by the Trump administration is long overdue.
yeah, I think so too. And I think even though we should have a greater amount of public interest in scrutinizing the colleges, it is at least now big enough to make an impact and have some kind of influence and effect over what universities do. Because for years they've been basically untouchable, and frankly, that's why they act the way that they do under this administration. Is they just think, well, this is 4 years they're going to pass by, and the next administration isn't going to really care.
Yes. Interestingly, K through 12 education, I think, is always in the news. It's always the controversies are caught there earlier. There seems to be more vigilance because parents are more on top. Not all parents, of course, I'm generalizing, but they are more on top of what is taking place, and their kids are at home and they can see if bad stuff is happening. But the college campus, the advantage for a lot of young people is that that's away from home. The parents aren't supervising the way they did. So the colleges end up getting away with, it's not just bad action, it's illegal action. And one note about that, for a lot of laws and civil rights, including the First Amendment, due process rights, these rights are not self-enforcing. until the Trump administration, to enforce those rights against a college, one needed to file a lawsuit. Well, that's a very tall ask. That's a big ask for most individuals. And then individuals end up fighting with institutions who have more resources and time and money. So the deck was really stacked in favor of these schools just doing whatever they wanted. So bravo to the Trump administration, at least in this space of scrutinizing and supervising, I like to say babysitting, these bad actor schools.
Yeah.
And the same can be said about the University of Virginia. So turning our attention to Virginia, the most recent development was an announcement of the Education Department investigating George Mason University for continuing its diversity ideology programs against Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. But this is on the heels of what happened at the University of Virginia. That was an interesting case because unlike Harvard and Columbia, the Education Department was investigating the University of Virginia sort of on the QT. I think it began in April, and it became clear that the president, James Ryan, was a problem for the Trump administration because he had been so in favor of these diversity programs, and they began to request that he step down. And at the same time that we were finding out about this investigation that had really happened for months without much public awareness, Ryan did in fact step down. This is another victory for the Trump administration, I think also for America, and shows that finally schools are answering to someone. And the announcement that George Mason University is now being investigated is also good news because we're having the same phenomenon there, that civil rights are not being respected. They are all standing by their diversity programs, even if they rebrand or rename them. And this is not acceptable for the Trump Education Department. And who knows, heads may roll at George Mason as well. So any thoughts on that, Jared?
Well, I'm just glad that somebody who's been supporting the diversity movement is out. That's pretty much my only thought on it. But we have to still be skeptical of where their board's going to take the university because, as Scott Gerber wrote about, I think 2 weeks ago now, its board has been rather dismissive about talking about the issue of viewpoint diversity on campus. So we'll have to wait and see if in their next board meeting they actually bring this issue up and what kind of measures they'll take to change course on their campus.
Yes, no, you're talking about the University of Virginia.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the good news there is that the University of Virginia has a very strong and active alumni group called the Jefferson Council. The Jefferson Council actually helped fund a report that the Virginia Association of Scholars published last year on DEI spending at Virginia state schools. And I think James Bacon is the founder and president, at least as far as I know he still is. And he has a very active blog. And it's an interesting point that a lot of alumni, number one, don't necessarily know what's happening at their alma mater. But number two, when they find out about these shenanigans, they do not like it and often mobilize to make that viewpoint known. And it's good that they have some influence since we need greater checks on university decisions and actions. But it's true. The other point is that does the tail wag the dog here? It's always good to go after the head of an institution. Obviously, a lot of culture is top down, and if a president steps down, it does mean that there's going to be a shift in the culture. But the real problem, not just at universities and colleges, but also in DC generally, this is why we call it the swamp, is that the tail wags the dog. It's the bureaucrats who've been there forever, who know the ropes, and who end up calling the shots, even though a figurehead is supposed to be the one making the decisions. So, is that what you mean, Jared, that we'll have to wait and see what the board does? Oopsie, Jared, I can't hear you.
I said yes, that is what I was referencing as far as we have to wait and see what the board does. Now, we also have to see what the university is going to do in regards to the gun case. Have you read any of this so far about UVA's gun case and the harassment of the Jewish student on campus?
No, but this rings a bell with George Mason. There was that one student who talked about assassinating Trump. Uh,
Yeah.
that was months ago, but I remember you circulating that. No, could you brief me on what's happening with the gun?
Yeah, so I mean, I myself need to learn more about it too, but from what I understand so far, there was a letter released to President Jim Ryan after he had resigned, and it came from the Justice Department that questioned UVA's handling of this alleged hate crime against a Jewish student. There was apparently a student on UVA's campus that brought a gun to the dorm and was threatening a Jewish student. From my understanding, the university has been very slow to investigate this, and so the father of the Jewish student has brought the case to the attention of, the federal people in the Fed, who are now pressing the university to look at this farther.
I see. So, do you know, are they claiming that this is a civil rights issue? I guess that's what's meant by a hate crime.
I would suppose that that's what it would come down to. I think that what's going to have to come out in the coming days is more information on the case. All that's known at this point, and at least from what I've read, is that there was a student that brought a gun to school and was carrying it around in his dorm and was using it to make really these incendiary threats towards a Jewish student, making anti-Semitic comments towards the student. And, while the gun was never fired and it seemed to have not been pointed at him and used against him in a threatening way, it was shown and he was saying anti-Semitic things. And so the student was, obviously caught way off guard and felt threatened. And when reported to the university, apparently UVA was not really quick to act on this. So the Fed is pushing the university to do something.
Wow. Well, I
Yeah.
see a number of legal and policy issues here. I mean, is the student even authorized to have a gun? What is the school's policy about someone being armed and brandishing a firearm? There are a number of issues with this, so I'm glad the dad is pressing it. That's the type of thing that obviously should not get neglected. When was this, Jared?
This was in a NBC report that just came out on the 10th. So this was yesterday.
Okay.
And I think, we still need to get some more information on it. But as for information on UVA, any listeners on this should, be paying attention to that. And I probably will write on it myself so people will see about it on Minding the Campus.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of things could be said about the neglect of instances like this, but one point that Amy Wax made really forcefully in her complaint against the University of Pennsylvania in the news a lot, is the double standard applied. Certain students simply are favored because of their racial and ethnic background, and other students are basically disfavored. If someone, a black or Hispanic or other ethnic minority, is threatened on campus, that is treated with the utmost seriousness. But if Jewish or students of European descent experience things along these lines, there's foot dragging. It's as if there are just favored populations and disfavored populations, and this is really anathema. I mean, it's just odious to the American rule of law and equal protection of our laws. And for those who want more details on such instances at the University of Pennsylvania, I really would refer people to the complaint that Professor Amy Wax, who's at the law school at the University of Pennsylvania, filed a few months ago now. So, yeah, we should be absolutely watching that story. Well, okay, so the third topic that I wanted to discuss was this development with the False Claims Act. And as the title of that statute indicates, the idea is you can't make false claims. You can't say to the government you're doing one thing and then not do it or do another. Now, what should be said is that already there's a lot of paperwork that schools do when they get federal funding, whether through grants or scholarships or student loans. But with student loans, they complete what's called a program participation agreement, or a PPA, where they do say that they are complying with all federal laws, especially Title IX, the discrimination ban based on sex, and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, banning discrimination based on race. So already there is paperwork that creates a contractual obligation between schools and the federal government, and the schools are not supposed to be lying about what they say in that program participation agreement. But the False Claims Act adds another layer to this. First, apparently the language of some of that paperwork is changing to incorporate by name this statute. But also, in some instances, schools are being asked to independently certify that they do not discriminate based on race or sex. I support that. If they are going to begin applying this law, and they have a history of doing business with the school, and this law is a new application, a new tool for the federal government, I support that they are requiring a separate document where the school certifies and understands that under the False Claims Act, it's very serious if you misrepresent or say something false. The certification is a way of making an impression on a school that we might have turned a blind eye, or prior administrations maybe didn't do anything, but that is not the case here. We are taking seriously your assurances that you are not discriminating based on race. And the False Claims Act, what's unusual about it compared to prior business practice, is that it allows, in a lawsuit brought, triple damages that the school would have to pay. So that's almost like punitive damages, but it's to get very serious about what the schools are saying and if they're telling the truth. And the other new feature is that private individual American citizens can instigate a False Claims Act inquiry. Now, I don't know from the press release that the American Alliance for Equal Rights released, I don't know if that means an individual private American citizen can file a lawsuit on behalf of taxpayers in the federal government. I'm not sure it goes that far, but an individual citizen can instigate an inquiry, and apparently if the complaint prevails, that individual citizen might benefit, that would be able to share in some of the award. So there is a financial incentive for citizens to instigate such actions. So, this, I think, has schools very worried because of the risk of a large damage award. Of course, schools also worry just about being sued at all, because being sued requires time and attention on the part of the school's staff and the general counsel's office. But it's another indicator that the Trump administration is using whatever it can to put schools on notice that what would you say, the party days are over. The days of doing what you want and playing fast and loose with the paperwork, saying that you're observing civil rights law while you're having these different standards for different groups. Those days are over. Somebody's got new sheriff in town. Somebody's going to get serious about these assurances and about compliance with federal law.
It sounds like what you're describing is an executive branch that's enforcing the law. Isn't that crazy? Well, there was almost no enforcement at all under the Biden administration, unless, of course, you were a right-leaning institution. I mean, the Biden administration went after Christian institutions. He tried to get their nonprofit status revoked. But now we have an administration that I think every institution should be saying to themselves, yeah, man, we should really watch out, and maybe we should tell the truth, and maybe we should not discriminate. And this is going to put a lot of institutions on notice to have an administration in the White House that's actually going to enforce the law, because we know that all of them have pretended to be following the law for years, but actually create these ulterior programs, or they create different methodologies in order to meet the same goal, which is to discriminate on the basis of race. Such as your Hispanic serving institutions where, oh, we want to get more Hispanics in so we get more federal grants, or institutions like the Ivy Leagues that for decades and decades required Asian students and white students to have much higher bars on exams compared to minority counterparts. Well, I'm just happy that the administration's actually enforcing the law.
Yes. Cause for rejoicing. It's interesting that you bring up the Hispanic serving institutions, because I wonder what is going to happen with that. On their face, seems problematic. You're treating different groups differently, just based on race, and I think there's more possible corruption with that, and trying to recruit Hispanic students to get to a certain threshold so that you can benefit from these grants. I should also make the point that the University of Pennsylvania is actually also facing lawsuits from individual athletes, including 3 swimmers. So very much in the space of Riley Gaines and this Will/Leah Thomas. So it's not precluding individual civil litigation. People can still sue. But what we have here is an administration that is getting serious about its enforcement through its offices of civil rights, and using all these tools at their disposal. So it does seem a new day for colleges and universities. And we did have this United States Supreme Court opinion, Students for Fair Admission, which was in the courts for years. Whenever you bring a case like this, it starts at the trial level, it goes through the appellate process, which can be quite time consuming. You can have 3-judge panels, you can have en banc or full court reviews, and then getting to the Supreme Court, which even takes more time, meaning a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into the Students for Fair Admission litigation, where the court emphatically found that diversity programs are illegal as illegal race-based discrimination. And the idea that colleges and universities are responding to that momentous opinion with something like a yawn, or we're just going to nibble around the edges but keep intact these diversity programs, it's really unacceptable. We can't have one standard of law for everyone, and another one for these privileged, pampered colleges and universities. But that's what they are accustomed to, and that's why we see this resistance.
Yeah, but we also just can't continue to keep living under complete fakery. I mean, my whole life I was told, "Oh, well, in America, we don't judge people on the basis of their race." Well, we certainly do. We certainly do, and so we should either stop doing that, or we should just be honest about what we're doing. So,
Yes, yes, live not by lies,
right.
as Solzhenitsyn said. So I think all of those stories are positive for the most part. So why don't you take over and
Yeah.
brief us on the topics you wanted to discuss?
Well, the first one is actually ties into what we were talking about with enforcement. One of the things that the Trump administration has made me a little upset about is it is now saying that Chinese students can come into the university in exchange for rare earth minerals. This, I think, is a complete disaster, and I hope he does a U-turn on it, because we know emphatically that Chinese students have committed espionage against the United States. They've stolen our information. And they've used our research to give themselves military applications that are now competitive with us. One of those things that I wrote about this week is China's weather program. China has the world's largest weather engineering program. This simply means that through cloud seeding and through a bunch of other mechanisms, they are actually able to make it rain. They can cause droughts. And these things can be used for military application because the United States has done so in the past. We did it in Vietnam, where we uh, did cloud seeding over Ho Chi Minh in order to prolong the monsoon season so that we could dis basically disable troops and make it much harder for them to fight. Well, U.S. universities have been pioneers in weather engineering technology. University of Nevada has been specializing in this since the 1960s. They've been able to do cloud seeding projects that prolong snow season so that so that the American West doesn't go through extended droughts. And undoubtedly, students who are coming from China who enroll in our STEM programs have gathered this information. In 2008, for example, that China was able to do cloud seeding operations in order to make it not rain so that they could get through the Olympics. I think that it would be extremely dangerous for the Trump administration to not reverse this policy, because by allowing Chinese foreign nationals into our institutions, you're only creating more room for them to take our research and use it for military application that makes them competitive against us.
Hmm.
And that's just really stupid. I mean, why would you give your enemy all of the tools?
Yes. Um, You know, this would involve, I would think, both the State Department, the Homeland Security Department, the Education Department, how to vet foreign students who want to come study in the United States. And these countries of concern, such as China, obviously the bar should be much, much higher. So I hadn't heard about this rare earth minerals in exchange, this allowing more. What's so odd about that is that you already have, as you say, this long record of malfeasance from Chinese students, graduate students, and I think sometimes faculty appointments. So that has to be the primary consideration, that we have national security risks with this particular group of students. Not that this is ripe for making a deal
Right.
that might sound good to the president. So I'm surprised to hear it. I mean, this is the one area that actually the State Department knows about this. We've been discussing it with Confucius Institutes and Confucius classrooms. It's not like this is a secret that these Chinese nationals pose a threat to us. So this development is a little surprising, no?
I was surprised by it. I've been surprised by a lot of things this administration's done in the last week. But needless to say, he should still reverse course. To give some listeners some background on what happened is, of course, the Trump administration had initially said that we need to bar foreign students from coming to universities. Now, he initially did this primarily at Harvard when he was trying to take away their ability to let foreign students enroll into Harvard over its issues with anti-Semitism. Well, now he basically used that chip as a bargaining tool with China and said, well, if you give us rare earth minerals, I'll reverse my foreign student policy and let Chinese students come to the US. Which I just think is it's very strange to use access to U.S. institutions as a bargaining chip. And what makes it even stranger is that he's using it as a bargaining chip for materials that we already have.
Mm,
Um, we are the most natural, the
rich.
natural rich country on Earth, and yet this administration, as well as all previous administrations, would rather bargain with other countries to get access to theirs. And I just think that's it's a crazy policy.
Yes, indefensible, really. So, yeah, it doesn't reflect well on the president to be switching positions, and policies should be better considered and principled, of course.
Yeah.
But really, we need as I say, the State Department, the Education, the Homeland Security to get together and decide on vetting, increased vetting for students of these countries of concern. And this is an issue, I think, where, again, there's a lot of public support for that. I think there's a lot of consensus in an age when that's difficult to achieve. So, yes, our your writing on this is Ian Oxnavad, also our other who works on issues with foreign students.
Yeah, Ian has done a good job and a lot of research on the issue of foreign interference and foreign funding of U.S. higher education institutions. In my piece on the weather program, on China's weather program, I cited his work. One of the things that the listeners to this ought to go check out is his work on California's relationship with China and how Newsom has allowed the Chinese to access California universities, which have led China to actually influence climate policy. Of course, California calls it climate change policy, but China has been a huge influencer in the California electric EV mandate, the electric car mandate. And a lot of that has come through the university systems with Chinese nationals working in these energy sectors. And, of course, Gavin Newsom's going to say, well, it's about the environment, but China's perfectly willing to let anybody do that because it helps them. I mean,
Hmm.
it crushes our economy and it allows their GDP to grow.
You know what's odd about this is that why are states contracting with foreign countries?
That's
Uh,
another thing that Ian pointed out because it's actually it's not constitutional.
it's not our
States,
constitutional design, right?
right. Yeah, states should not be able to make like bilateral trade or any agreement really with other nations. That's to be left up to DC. People working in the federal government have access to do that. Why we have governors doing it is beyond me. It's even more bewildering that anybody is working alongside China who is a known adversary and has committed espionage against the United States.
Yeah, no,
Um,
none of this adds up. I mean, it does seem like an area ripe for investigation by the Trump administration. So, did Ian call for that, maybe from the Department of Homeland Security?
Ian has definitely called for it in the past, and I remember when Nitu was on our staff, she obviously called for more scrutiny into Chinese nationals studying in the United States. Um, and for a long time, it seemed that the Trump administration was going to go that way, especially because the Biden administration did nothing.
Mhm.
The Biden administration launched really no scrutiny of institutions when it came to foreign funding, especially. And now we have an administration who, in a variety of ways, is enforcing the law, but when it comes to China is willing to use the universities as a bargaining chip for rare earth minerals. To me, it's a very strange thing. On the other hand, if I were to play devil's advocate, he could change his opinion next week. I mean, he tends to change his opinion quite a lot. So it's possible that in the future he will use this as another bargaining chip to actually shut down entrance for Chinese students into American universities. On the brighter side, the just as a consequence of the tensions between China and the U.S. right now, Chinese enrollment is going down.
Mm.
Indian nationals have far surpassed Chinese nationals in U.S. institutions. And they've been doing that for a while now, but now it's a lot more significant because Chinese students are not coming here. Or one of the reasons for that, though, is that their research institutions are now so powerful as a consequence of all of the knowledge that we gave that country that they don't really need us anymore, because we gave them a binky and they have a bottle now, and they can just do whatever, they can come up with their own research.
Yeah, yeah. Um, the whole foreign influence and foreign students, it in the first Trump administration, actually, the education department did issue a report on the amount of money that colleges and universities were taking and not reporting, even though they're required to under federal law. This is Section 117 of the Higher Education Act, another instance of schools just flouting the law because they can. But that report was issued at the very end of the first Trump administration. But all of this money coming in and purchasing influence, as American education is supposed to be for American citizens. So it really reflects poorly, yet again, on these schools that they seem to be completely for sale,
Yeah,
completely ready to be compromised. But certainly with what you're bringing up, blame to go around for the administration
yeah,
as well as to the schools. It's like, well,
yeah.
who is protecting the country?
Yeah. Well, the last thing I'll say about this before jumping to the next topic, we don't have a whole lot of time to go into these major details, but for broader context, the entire reason why we allow foreign students into U.S. institutions in the first place is because our intelligence community and the foreign policy wonks in DC view this as a vital nation building force. They think, well, if we just simply educate people in Western standards, we will have a chance to democratize the world. And there's a lot of people, I think, even including on our staff, who would agree with the allowing this to happen for the benefit of American interest. But my question that I pose to anybody that supports this is, when has it actually benefited us? We can point to so many examples of people that we've educated in the United States who we, in 20 years' time, turn around and fight a war with. That to me has been completely unsuccessful. I don't think any amount of education you bring to the developing world is going to make them any less crazy, any less, any more democratized. There's nothing that you can do. So I just don't think that bringing them here is useful for foreign policy interests. And not only is it not useful for foreign policy interests, it has the double whammy of taking seats away from American students and allowing U.S. institutions to not prioritize the very citizens that
Pay
gave
for it.
them pay for it and provided its existence. Um, but
Uh, that sounds rather delusional. I mean, political, the political systems that are chosen by foreign countries are up to them, and it's almost flippant about civilization. you know, Centuries or millennia old civilizations decide what type of political system to install. And the idea that a few students or a few years on American college campus would help you install Western type democracy with any real success seems pretty wrongheaded and misguided. I mean, a lot more goes into political systems, cultural traditions, et cetera, et cetera. So,
right,
yeah, yeah. I mean, the foreign students exchange programs are fine, foreign language programs are fine, but when you begin to exclude your own citizens in favor of foreign students, there's a real problem. But
yeah.
anyway, how
Well,
about the District of Columbia?
yes. Well, this ties in really well with what we were just talking about, because what exactly are we exporting with our education institutions? Anything but an education that says that's too sensitive to talk about. Um, Lewis, member of our staff, wrote this really great essay about the two nonprofits, Fair for All and Join Our America, who filed a civil rights complaint with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. They allege that the University of District of Columbia has violated Title VI and the First Amendment by shutting down the opportunity for a for a debate on their campus. That debate was titled, "Is the American Dream Alive for Black Americans?" And one of the university's administrators wrote back saying this, I'll read it. "Thank you for considering our great university to expand the reach of your organization's mission and ideas. However, we are passing on this opportunity. Our university is comprised of many students whose identities actually do put them at risk in a society that has a known history of criminalizing race, gender, sexuality, immigration, and socioeconomic status. In my view, it's not enough to be a part of the conversation. These conversations should unequivocally acknowledge the risk that people with marginalized and politicized identities face in their lives daily. At UDC, we do not entertain these realities as debatable." And it's just like, all we wanted to talk about was, is the American dream alive for Black Americans?
Let me just stop you for a second. So who was supposed to be speaking? Who was the speaker who would run with this question?
I'm confused about the speaker myself, but the organization that was going to run it was Our America Foundation. Our American Foundation reached out to the University of the District of Columbia to host a debate on this topic. The speakers, I don't know if they ever even got decided because the premise of the debate was totally shut down by the university outright. And the person that said this response is a guy named Dr. Gamble, who's a political scientist specializing in Black feminism and queer visibility in media. I don't know what that is, and it's probably a pseudo-intellectual discipline, as most of these people occupy. But
Well, what's odd
that's,
here is that the question, I mean, obviously the idea that certain topics can't be discussed and students are at risk because of a debate. This is too silly to even address. This is no longer education, right? I mean, this is some type of sociological experiment with a university tacked on. This is not interested in the life of the mind.
yeah.
All of that are sort of obvious, ridiculous aspects to this story. But aside from that, is the American dream alive for Black Americans? It does seem like a topic that's sort of sympathetic to a lot of the political left. It's race conscious. It's suggesting inequity. Black Americans might not have access to the American dream. So it's a curious incident, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's also to me, the debate question, I would have actually been interested to see what the premise of that actual debate would have been, only because the left, I think, is going to automatically imply that, well, on the basis of you being a Black person, the American dream is not alive and well. But any conservative, I mean, talk to Ben Carson. He would not say, as a Black individual, the American dream was dead for him. There's a lot of successful Black people in this country. And what I find just so odd is that when you sell an entire cohort of people in this country a myth that, well, success is never going to happen for you, they just don't even pursue it to begin with. I mean, it's already a self-defeating narrative. And so in reality, I mean, beyond the stupidity of like, oh, all these identities are at risk, the debate should have happened as just as a basis to actually motivate individuals to see where
Yeah.
they can go in life, not just
Yeah.
say, oh, because you're Black, I can't make it in this world. I'm white, and it is so hard.
Well, I was going to say it's not just that there are success stories, obviously from Black Americans, but I think a lot of people, wasn't it David Azerot from Hillsdale, I think he's at Hillsdale now, at the time he was at Heritage, used the expression black privilege. And of course, Amy Wax's complaint suggests that offending a black person or Hispanic person is taken very seriously, whereas offense to a Jewish student or a student of European descent is not. So some people might say at this point in time, being a black is advantageous. Uh, that needs to be said. But I think protecting students from debate topics is so much the antithesis of education that a school like that should shut down. I mean, if you are hostile to ideas, you're not an institution of education. I mean,
Right.
it's that simple. And so the privileges that you enjoy as a university, nonprofit status and tax exemptions, those should be investigated because an institution like that is not about education.
Right. No, it's not. I mean, it's honestly bewildering, just to read the message from that person saying that we know we're not going to we're not going to take on this debate. Sometimes it's so bewildering that it's actually hard to come up with the vocabulary to explain how stupid it is. Um, but I think any viewer will kind of get it just by saying that I don't have the vocabulary to explain how dumb it is. It's just so beyond the pale that um, you're a university the purpose of your existence is to debate ideas, and then you have the opportunity to do so, and you can't. It
Well, one thought is that these administrators have advanced by spouting politically correct positions. Their ticket to success, to easy jobs, well
right,
paying, has all been based on political conformity. Um,
right,
and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That has worked for them thus far, and they are not going to course correct because somebody suggests they're not actually in the field of education, but in the
right,
field of indoctrination. So I think it's a sober commentary on what happens with universities, and those people are the norm. People are advancing because they conform. It's not about the merit of someone's ideas or the rigor of their academic work. On the contrary, it's the party line, the party line, the party
right,
line. And the word I would use is it's just embarrassing to get correspondence like that. That's such an overt political statement as opposed to a well-reasoned response. But
right.
let's hope that the investigation has, that has some benefits and that this wrong can be righted.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and then by the way, this brings us pretty good, like on a pretty good segue into our next topic, which is the big beautiful bill. Because speaking of administrators, kind of these administrators that shouldn't be in education, there might not be a place for them anymore. Because even though the big beautiful bill was largely a huge bust and I think a massive disappointment from the Trump administration, its higher education provisions were actually pretty good.
Hmm.
One of the first things that it did, as what something that Andrew Gillen has pointed out, is that it eliminated the grad plus loan.
Right.
Also, the parent plus loans now have maximum caps. It also changed the new income-driven student loan repayment. And it also created a cap, and I can't remember how large it is. I think it's like 200,000 over so many years for college education. Having a cap on the amount that students can borrow is, I think, one of the best policy moves that you could have made with higher education. As we've talked so much at length before about the student loan crisis, the left has used this to say, oh, well, the Trump administration is only trying to make higher education for the rich.
Hmm.
Because if my law school costs 300 grand and the government's only going to give me 200, how can I go to law school?
Hmm.
Well, what they fail to realize is that the unlimited borrowing is what allowed all these costs to go way up in the first place because the institution said to themselves, "Hey, there's so many dollars out here I can grab. Let me grab them." And that's exactly what happened. When you limit the amount of money that's going into the pipeline, the universities are going to have to make a decision. Well, if they want to capture more students, they got to meet them where they're at and charge them reasonable fees. And in order to fluctuate that and maintain their businesses, they might have to get rid of the things that are useless, such as DEI offices.
Hmm. Yes,
Yeah,
certainly it's easy federal money that has fueled the insane tuition increases. You know, tuition has increased at a greater rate than even medical care. I always like to point out people wring their hands about the rate of medical inflation, but college cost has exceeded even that. There are provisions to look at programs with earnings potential for particular programs. Since college is marketed as a way of getting a good job, one understands provisions like that. The question, of course, and we've mentioned this before, is what are the results for just a general liberal arts or humanities education? If this is all going to be dollars and cents and looking at return on investment, scrutinizing programs for the earnings of their graduates, that isn't really what a liberal arts education is about. When is that conversation going to happen? Are we abandoning the humanities because what's the commercial return on that? And uh, you know, it's a larger topic about the preference for what is measurable. You know, incomes are easy to document, relatively easy to track. A humanities education, how does one measure that? How does one measure the value of that? Um, and if it can't be measured, does that mean it should be discarded? So I agree with you. A lot of good things in this bill, obviously capping the amount that students can borrow, getting rid of the capping seriously what parents can borrow, the graduate level. All of that is to the good, and the simplification of the repayment programs are also very good. The issue here is that it is so focused on earnings, the graduate of earnings, in which, you know, and it does seem, as you point out at first blush, will women's studies programs survive? You know, something like that, which doesn't transmit any type of real knowledge or skill, what we call grievance studies. But I'm thinking more of like, what about a degree in the classics, where you
yeah.
study Latin and Greek, or classic literature, you know, Homer. Um, what's going to happen with things like that? It's almost like we're so busy trying to cut things down and bring accountability to the system that we aren't really thinking about that aspect.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I'd say to that is Lisa Libbs, who's one of our contributors on Mining the Campus, makes a rather compelling case that the real traditional liberal arts, you know, your actual English where you read Shakespeare, your actual history where you're going to have to read the documents from the founding fathers. I don't think that these things are going to go away, and probably because of AI is what and she makes a compelling case for this, and so does Joe Nelvin, who has been talking to an array of engineer students and students in the STEM. Their jobs are actually the ones that have been most disrupted by artificial intelligence. We're now seeing a rise of people who are graduating from liberal arts have higher employability prospects because they are actually qualified to do human jobs, speak to people, relate to people. Whereas engineers and computer programmers and
They're
coders,
obsolete. They're
they're
obsolete.
yeah, they're becoming obsolete. So you're going to need people who are capable of writing really well, communicating well. I'd probably see a rise in communications jobs. I mean, it's going to probably be AI linked somehow, where you know half of your job's done by AI, but you still need a human person on the other side to put in the emotion, to actually pitch an idea. Not everything can be robotic in our society, but when you're talking about coding, those jobs are going away. And so I think the Trump administration might do well to take a look at, typically the Republicans and the Trump administration particularly has been very big on promoting STEM careers, and they want people to go get, the more traditional jobs and use education as a venue for getting employed.
I think that's almost everyone, Jared. It's not just the
Yeah.
Trump administration.
Yeah, it's every. I mean, even the Democrats now are saying that. But I think it's soon they're going to have to reverse course because everything that they've said is going to get people employed is not working anymore.
Well, I mean, that is the risk when you get too attached to particular skills. Well, in 25 years, are those skills even relevant? As opposed to, the humanities is about the human condition. It's sort of a timeless and universal area of study. So it's relevant always and not just for employability, but for living a good life. One thought is, these breadth requirements that schools impose. You can have your majors and your minors, but you need to have. It'd be interesting to see if the humanities can survive in that space. That there will be these requirements and the popular programs that seem to be money makers will come and go, will change, but perhaps as a constant will be these requirements, for example, in the civics education, that anyone with a college degree should have just a basic literacy in American civics. And I wonder if it could even be pass fail. And in that way, you are maintaining some of the humanities education. But I hadn't really heard that, Jared, that you were saying that AI threatens mostly the STEM fields, that people who have been obsessing about STEM and prioritizing that are now going to be most at risk. And therefore, liberal arts educated people are the ones who have the real thinking and navigational abilities to handle really whatever is thrown at them.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me, but of course, I said before, I thought you were going to say that Shakespeare can be studied at the secondary level, that literature can be studied at the secondary level, that it need not be a college requirement, and that you can tell those who have these liberal arts well-rounded education. They exist at the age of 18, high school graduates as well as 22-year-olds, college graduates, and that brings up the question of
Yeah.
whether the post-secondary institutions are they really adding value? Can we even ask that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't disagree with you that, and probably if I had been thinking about it even longer, I would have come to the conclusion that yes, we should have 18-year-olds graduating with a profound liberal arts education. Um, I just, I have a lot of skepticism that that will ever happen in this country because, I mean, look at how hard higher education has been to reform.
Right, right.
Now, I mean, try to apply that to even more schools, even more public school districts, with kids who are on their iPads all day and don't really want to be there.
Yes,
I
yes.
mean, and then of course parents. I mean, it's hard to convince any parent that you're there for a good reason, and they're always going to be skeptical of you, even the conservative ones. Even if you're a conservative pushing a conservative cause, the conservatives are going to be skeptical of you. But yes, the 18-year-olds should be graduating high school with a liberal arts education. They should know something about their country. They should be good voters and good citizens. Um, they're obviously not, but I mean they should be. But in terms of college, it, it, I think there will be at least a selling value when you're talking about the commercialization of college. I think there will still be a selling value to the liberal arts compared to the STEM programs because we're going to see a massive amount of STEM related jobs get filled with robots.
Well, we will see. Sometimes I wonder if these alarms aren't exaggerated. Um, it's sort of like with the workforce and companies wanting cheap labor, and suddenly all the customer service was in India. But then people didn't like speaking to somebody who didn't speak English, and there were costs associated, hidden costs that they didn't realize. So we'll see how that plays out. But interesting that you bring up sort of the well-rounded person, and that person might be in more demand if we're going to view this as just a commercial proposition. But we are over an hour, I think, so we should probably wrap up. And I should also say we got some feedback on what we are doing. And one suggestion was to start our episodes with something like a mission statement. So next time, Jared, you and I can maybe hammer that out, just a
Yeah,
sentence
okay.
or two on what we're trying to accomplish here, and we can read that or state that at the beginning so everybody knows where we are coming from. But it's Friday, so I hope you have a nice weekend. And the idea is in 2 weeks' time, we will meet again and go over our favorite news stories. So thank you, Jared. But let's say goodbye and see you next time.